Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Hải Bùi. Hải is a Vietnamese Hungarian immigrant and former software engineer who has transitioned into a fashionpreneur. He's the founder of Kỳ Lân, the first activewear brand focused on Asian aesthetics with a mission to empower Asian immigrants globally to embrace their heritage through sportswear. Hải will share his personal journey of rejecting his culture as a child to fully embracing it and how that led him to build a brand that helps others do the same. Hải, welcome to the show.
Hi, Maggie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, we're very excited to listen to your story today. We have interviewed you in a previous article, which you can find on AsianHustleNetwork.com. But I'm excited to have you on the podcast today because I think a lot of people are really interested in your journey, your story, and what you're building with Kỳ Lân. So I'd love to jump right into it and learn a little bit about your upbringing and your childhood. So can you tell me a little bit about what your upbringing was like growing up in Hungary?
Sure, yeah. So, as you can imagine, it's Hungary is a very homogeneous country. Not a lot of Asians there. When I was in grade school, I was the only Asian kid in the whole school. And yeah, back then there were not a lot of Asians in the country. My parents were one of the first few Vietnamese people. They went to Hungary through a scholarship back in the 80s. Back then, Hungary was still part of the Soviet Union. So Vietnam had this big scholarship program for their top students, and they sent their students out to other communist countries like Hungary, East Germany, Czech Republic, Russia, and my parents ended up in Hungary. And in the beginning, it was really tough. My parents, like most families in Vietnam at the time, were very poor, especially after the war. Everyone was having a hard time. And my parents, well, luckily they got the scholarship, right? But the funding they got were limited, so uh, they didn't have the best of life in Hungary either, but it was still better than staying in Vietnam. So they finished their engineering program in Hungary. My dad was an electrical engineer and my mom was a chemist. But after graduating, they were looking for jobs and the they didn't find any opportunities that they thought would help them build a better future. Like they would still make a living, but they quickly realized that it's working for someone else is not the best path forward to building generational wealth. Like they would definitely get by, but they also had to look out for my future, right? Because they had me pretty early. My parents got married right after graduating, like most people in the previous generation, right?
Yeah.
And they quickly realized like, oh, well, it's better to try their own luck, even if it means selling t-shirts on the marketplace or opening up a food stall, because even if they didn't make as much per hour, they could always just put in more time. And yeah, that's the future they chose. It was still better than going back to Vietnam because at the time, the country was, my family was so poor that I still remember my dad telling me the story when like he would play with his friends on the street and they would see like a fruit on the tree, but it wouldn't be like ripe at all. It was still green. But my dad told me that they would still eat it because they knew that if they came back like another day, it would be gone because someone else would eat it. So it's back then times were tough and my parents had to put in so much hours and they made a lot of sacrifices for me to have a better future. They put me in the best schools. They worked until late night and they had to find like a caretaker for me. They were not around a lot, which I think a lot of people with immigrant parents can relate to, but it's important to recognize the sacrifices they made for me. And I think that was part of the reason why it was hard for me to pivot my career as well, because they worked hard. They gave me a really good education. They paid for me to um, come to America and get a top degree, and now I'm not using it, right?
Yes, I understand. And I feel like that's a very common experience that a lot of people in the Asian community have nowadays, especially in our generation. And looking at our parents, first of all, what your parents did is very courageous, right? Especially at that time, you know, I'm sure they were looking at others around them. And the norm usually is, people would find a job, a 9 to 5, as soon as they graduate. And it is very courageous of them to go into entrepreneurship. And but I think that because they had each other and they were on the same page, that was also probably really helpful as well. And looking at that, I'm sure now looking at them, looking back at, their experiences growing up, while you were growing up, that has contributed a lot to how you perceived entrepreneurship, right? And them moving to a whole new country and pursuing their dreams and taking a chance on, what their dream is, taking a chance on actually pursuing their goals. That probably has contributed a lot to how you perceive your goals and your dreams, right? So I would love to know, can you talk a little bit about how that has really contributed to your perspective, especially as you were growing up? And I know that you made some moves as well, moving to the US. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that and how it was compared to your time growing up in Hungary?
Yeah, no, I definitely did not imagine I would go into entrepreneurship at all. When I grew up, I saw my parents work hard. I would actually, yeah, I would stay at home like most of the time by myself. Sometimes there would be someone looking after me, and I would see my parents work from 7 a.m. until like 9 p.m. and it looked hard. And they would always tell me to just focus on my education so that I would not have to do the same. And it was not like they did not paint a glamorous picture of it at all. Like it kind of portrayed as something to avoid, even though wherever I would look, I would see examples of entrepreneurship in my family and people in Vietnam. Like my relatives in Vietnam also have their like storefront in front of their homes. Like most people actually, like it's actually really inspiring and interesting to see when you go um, look around the streets of Vietnam. Everybody has their storefront in front of their homes. And I only realized that recently that, yeah, I think it's just entrepreneurship is how people lift themselves up from poverty. And it's hard work, but it's also, even though it's not glamorous for some people, it's also, I think it gives people the freedom to carve their own future, right? So that's how I kind of understand it right now. But like when I came to the US, I did not have any ambitions of becoming an entrepreneur. I thought I was happy with my path of becoming a software engineer. I was really interested in tech. I was a complete nerd growing up. I did not imagine I would be in fashion either. I was the token Asian kid with the nerdy glasses. My mom would buy my clothes. Uh, it would always be like 1 or 2 sizes up, so it was not flattering at all, right? Uh, it was more practical, right? Because like the mentality was like, oh well, kids grow fast, so it has to be like these oversized clothes so that they always fit. And only after moving to the US is when I started embracing my own identity, not just as an Asian, but also being more unashamed to show myself. Because in Hungary, growing up as an Asian kid, I didn't want to stand out. Like I already got bullied. I mean, it's not like everyone is a bully, right? Most of the people were really friendly, but like it only takes one person once a month to just kind of make you realize like, well, I don't I didn't feel completely welcome there. It only takes one person to ruin that experience, right? So and then for me, the self-defense mechanism was to just try to blend in, try to um, not show my unique side. But after moving to the US, that all changed. I tried to dress better. I tried to seek out more of the Asian community. I saw other people like me around. And also, it also helped that I see people in the media, right? I know it's a little bit cliche for some people, but I think representation matters, right? I see like other Asians with non-traditional career paths. Like I was reading Simu Liu's book, and he was telling the story about how he got laid off from Deloitte and how he had to hide his initial choice to become an actor from his parents, or like Jimmy O Yang pursuing comedy career. And I remember reading that and I was like, wait, you can do that. You can just not not continue doing this 9 to 5 office job career. And it just kind of like all these influences, right? It just suddenly clicks. It all just comes together, right? Like there are all these external influences with representation. I see my parents and my relatives doing entrepreneurship, but it's also in the local community. I see new wave Vietnamese restaurants, coffee shops. I see on social media these new Asian brands trying to carve out their space and our culture, right? With I see, for example, Asian boba tea flavors or something as simple as like Asian perfume brands. I actually tried it. It's like it's really interesting. You see something like, oh, it's rice scented perfume, and it's like it sounds so simple, but it just feels like it almost feels empowering, right? Like it's like even you see all these traditional fragrances, it's all like these flowers or like oh, sandalwood, whatever. But like I think it's just makes it feel more like I don't know if it's the right word, but like I feel like it makes me feel closer to home whenever I feel all these different Asian representations everywhere. And I think that's why I chose this path for my business as well. I want to help others represent their culture through clothing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really great points. And you mentioned when you were in Vietnam, you saw that there were a lot of vendors that had their storefronts, right? And I saw the same thing when I was in Vietnam, even back in my where my parents are from in Hong Kong, like so many different storefronts, and you would see like blocks and blocks of them. But it's really interesting to see how people would run their businesses and how it's different in each country, right? Like for example, in Vietnam, you can see them laying out all of their products in front of their store, and then at the end of the day, they collect all of those products back into the store
Yeah.
manually, like doing the hard labor. And but you like you mentioned, that's the way of life for them, like that it's entrepreneurship is in a lot of our blood because we really want to express our own creativity and work hard. And at the end of the day, express ourselves in a way where we can relate to others, right? And share that passion with others. And yeah, I think that you mentioned earlier that you wanted to build something that could connect with the Asian community, right? And I think it's incredible that you were able to, have this inspiration to start Kilon Athletics. And I want to know, like, what inspired you to start Kilon Athletics? And on that topic, what does the name Kilon mean to you personally? So can you talk a little bit about like where that inspiration came from to begin with, right? And talk a little bit about what it is and where that name came from as well.
Yeah. So after I've been living here for 5 years in Seattle, it was right after COVID. I was trying to make more friends, and I found this meetup group called 1.5 Gen Asians, and it was a group centered around Asians who grew up between two cultures. So it's people like me who moved to a country at a young age. Like I mean, it's like more like a spectrum, right? Like it's some people move early on in life, some people move later. But I think we all have these similar struggles, which is just trying to figure out what our identity is, right? Because like for some reason, for some people, it's like let's say they move to America at a later stage, they usually embrace their Asian side more, right? But for me, it was always fluctuating between, oh, am I more Hungarian or more Vietnamese? And but like I never fully felt comfortable on either side. And I also saw people who completely try to reject their Asian side because let's say they would see like if you go to university with a lot of international students, right? You can see some people just hang out with their own group. Like Vietnamese people would hang out with other Vietnamese people. There would be cliques for Chinese students and also Indian students. And I mean, it's an understandable reaction when it's like you go to a new country, right? You go to something familiar, but it's also important to kind of try to blend into a culture or just try to be a part of it, right? And then a lot of people, when they see that, they do a complete opposite of it. They just stop trying to hang out with Asians at all because they say, "Oh, I'm not like those people. I'm just like on my own." And I actually saw some people commenting things like that on social media, and sometimes I feel sad about that. But I feel like everyone has their own journey of trying to figure out. their own identity and and for me too, I only started embracing my culture recently. So yeah, like it all happened when I joined this meetup group. After going to a few events, I started becoming an organizer. I was actually an organizer for 3 years there, and I met all kinds of people, and I think the most common theme was this struggle around identity. But I think it was really fun to just connect with people who have similar struggles, similar cultures. Gives that really nice familiarity, right? Like after trying not to hang out with Asians specifically for so long, it kind of felt like, oh, this is really nice. And it's just a very mixed Asian group as well. Like it's not all Vietnamese people, it's all kinds of backgrounds. I've seen like people like Chinese, French, or even people who grew up in New Zealand. It was just really interesting to see these different backgrounds, even though it's just we could all be labeled as just Asians, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and then that kind of also gave me the inspiration for the name for the brand because Kỳ Lân is a Vietnamese version of the Kirin, which is Japanese, but there's also the I might be butchering the pronunciation, but the Chinese Thailand, right?
I think so,
Yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
and and it's also present in the Thai culture. So I feel like
Hmm.
it's a good representation of how like we have this shared root, even though we are all have our own different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I think that you touched upon, especially your upbringing and how you mentioned, experiencing a lot of bullying, which I feel like a lot of us in the Asian community go through as well, bringing our lunches to school and afraid of what people will say about our lunches and how it smells, right? And a lot of us actually do go through, those experiences of bullying, and it makes us think like that is the norm, right? Until you actually find a community and can connect with others in that community who have had similar upbringings or similar backgrounds, and you realize, okay, there's, other people who have gone through very similar experiences
Yeah,
as I
exactly.
have, right? And I think that you being in that group and you being an organizer of that group has really kind of opened those doors for you and shaped your own perception and your experiences as an Asian American. So was there a specific moment or experience that you had that made you realize, okay, this brand, Killen, has to exist? Like, was there kind of like that bullet, that light bulb moment where you knew, okay, this has to exist. This has to be something that I want to build on my own so that I can inspire others as well. A lot of 1.5 generation to second generation who are trying to connect more deeply with their culture, right? Do you have like a specific moment in time that you can share with us?
Hmm. I wouldn't say there's a specific point, but I would definitely say there was like a big build up, right? There's so many inspirations around us these days. I see like influences on social media. I see all these different brands, new businesses, and it's just all very inspiring, right? And like at one point, I even thought about opening some kind of like a Vietnamese coffee shop or like a dessert place. Like I definitely wanted to do something close to my culture, right? I wanted to contribute to like spreading Vietnamese culture. I've been exploring more and more of my heritage. And I keep realizing how much more richer it is than I initially thought. Like when a culture like Vietnamese culture is not as mainstream, right? Like let's say just 10 years ago, the Chinese and Japanese culture were mostly on the forefront. But even they had like some difficulties like becoming more mainstream, right? Like there was American Chinese cuisine. I think Japanese used to be the most popular one, right? But for Vietnamese culture, like people only knew about like pho and vermicelli or banh mi. And only recently I saw Vietnamese coffee is getting more mainstream and I see people wearing the traditional dress, the áo dài more often. But I realize I don't see people wearing like Asian or just Vietnamese inspired clothing in general on the streets or on the court. I see Asian motifs popping up more in streetwear, and a lot of them are more like Japanese and Chinese. It still felt like a little bit more like a niche. It's almost a little bit like too loud, right? Like it's always these exaggerated prints. I mean, I'm wearing one of those. I like to think that it's not that loud, but like I do try to kind of incorporate it into my everyday wardrobe. And I think that's what it's been missing in our current culture, like having more everyday clothes that could fit into our everyday wardrobe.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. I think, I definitely in recent years we have been seeing a lot more representation for Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese food, right? Like you mentioned, Vietnamese coffee has been gaining a lot of popularity. But I would love to see, Vietnamese representation is kind of celebrated a lot more throughout the year, right? I feel like we typically do see it a lot more during like Lunar New Year, right? Or maybe Mid-Autumn Festival. But, I think we are going through a little bit of a shift now. It did used to be a lot more Chinese and Japanese culture that was being celebrated a lot because it was just maybe it was access to, anime or maybe access to, news in China that was just more accessible. But, I think it will take a lot of, education and just talking about, the different traditions, things about Vietnamese culture, and we just need to talk about it a little bit more, right? And that's really
Yeah.
how it starts, is like educating the community about, what the culture means, like what people celebrate typically in Vietnamese culture. What are the different clothing that people wear? And I think that you're kind of like laying that foundation, and you're doing a fantastic job with Kilon, and kind of introducing Vietnamese clothing and style into the market. So it's a really great way. I think it's a really good introduction for the people to learn a little bit more about Vietnamese culture. So, as an entrepreneur, obviously there are always ups and downs. And, starting this business, can you talk about some of the biggest challenges that you faced in launching an activewear brand?
Well, we kind of talked about the struggles of abandoning the path that were laid out for me by my parents, right? I mean, other than that, I think that's another obstacle is fighting this resistance of people. Like some people, I feel like are a bit more hesitant about embracing their own culture, um, which is fine, right? It's like everybody has their own pace of exploring their own um, like identity. But for example, I've seen like some comments on social media about like, oh, this shirt just looks like a chef's shirt. And at first I didn't think much about it. To me, it didn't look like that. But like after the third comment, I really had to take a look and and yeah, I could see where they were coming from, right? But like at the same time, some self-doubt started creeping in, like, okay, are these designs, are they really bad or is it something else? And then after thinking about it for a while, I think it's a really interesting like cultural conditioning. Like like I was trying to it was this so the first collection is more focusing on like paddle and racket sports because it's what most popular in Asia, right? I feel like a natural fit to have the first collection center around racket sports. And one of the signature pieces is was a polo shirt because it's very iconic for tennis. And when I was thinking about it, like, well, polo shirt is worn by like waiters and like hotel staff. Nobody thinks about that, right? But then suddenly people see a Mandarin collared polo shirt and they'd say, "Oh, this is lame. This looks like a chef's shirt." Like, why why is it considered lame to look like a chef but not look like a waiter or a hotel staff, right? And I feel like that's some kind of weird cultural conditioning where we live in this Western-centric culture and people don't even realize that, oh, a lot of these clothes that we wear every day, they don't have the most flattering background either. Like for example, the Henley shirt, like it's okay, it's not exactly the Henley shirt to me looks like a just like a peasant shirt. I mean, I know it's not the exact background, right? But I do recognize that it does fit into our current fashion if it's styled appropriately. And I think that's true for the Mandarin shirt as well. I think we just need to normalize it, normalize wearing it for the right occasion and for the right outfit. And I think we, as Asians, need to reclaim these Asian fashion.
I think you're on
Um,
a good path. You're talking about kind of reclaiming, um, you know, the traditional ways that we can dress as representing part of our culture. But I think that, a lot of fashion designers nowadays are kind of putting their own spin to it as well, right?
Right.
Making it a little bit modern. And I think that's perfectly fine, right? But you do see some of these other maybe like Western companies that, you know, now after learning about, okay, Asian people wear these types of clothing, sometimes they'll try to put their own spin to it, but then make it a little bit inappropriate, where I feel like that is crossing the line a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it is very important for us to kind of reclaim and make sure that, we do keep that traditional aspect of clothing, traditional aspect of, design in our clothing, but also it is okay to kind of like put your own modern twist to it, to represent your own creativity, which I feel like you're doing really well with Kilon. And I think that's perfectly fine, right? We're obviously not living in the same generation as, years and years ago where, maybe it was a little bit more like tight knit and, a little bit more high in the collarbone, or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. But you're putting your own creativity and your own, twist and spin to it. And yeah, I think it does really just come down to education, right? And making sure that we educate people on why people wore these types of clothing before, why it's still important to this day, and why it's also important to still, keep certain aspects of those pieces of clothing the same. But on that topic, I think you're doing an incredible job at, putting your own narrative in it and making sure that you still have that traditional aspect of it. And there are multiple pieces of clothing that you have on the store right now. Is there one specific product that you think that everyone should have? It could be, unisex, or it could be men or women. But what is like one piece of clothing or product of Kilon Athletics that you think everyone should have, or that you think everyone should know about?
Hmm. I'm really proud of the polo shirts for both the women and the men. The men's polo shirt has the Mandarin collar, and to me it felt like um, when I first saw the design, to me it felt like, oh, this is how an Asian polo shirt should look like. I'll try my best not to make it look like a chef shirt, but at the same time, yeah, we just need to change the narrative, and it's gonna take some time for us to reclaim our own heritage and our own cultural designs, right? And for the women, I think I'm really happy with how the Asian design elements add a lot of gracefulness to the traditional polo shirt look. It has a really nice asymmetrical color that you can see on some of the Asian dresses, like the Yao or even like some of the Chinese dresses. And it also has this really cute flower petal sleeve. It adds a really nice elegance to it. And I was also, when I was designing it, I also wanted to kind of play with the asymmetry of the designs because paddle sports and racket sports are naturally asymmetric, right? You're holding a racket. So I wanted to kind of emphasize that through the asymmetric designs. So yeah, that's why those are my two favorite pieces.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't think about that. It does make sense though. You're holding a racket on one side, so you want to kind of balance it out. That is very interesting. And what kind of a message or feeling do you hope people can experience when they wear your apparel?
I want people to be unashamedly proud of their own background, of their own heritage, right? Like, I'm not saying they should make being Asian their whole personality, right? That's not the answer. I think it's just people expressing their own personality through clothing. I think that's important. Um, at least for me, it's important. And I know there are people like me out there who see the same way. And yeah, especially when you live in Western country, like in the US, right? I think it's important to stay connected with both sides. And if you live here in America, right, it's only natural to have to be a bit more conscious about seeking out your Asian side. Whereas if I lived in Asia, probably I would lean a bit more consciously to my Western side. I want people to embrace their own heritage and personality.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the clothes that we wear is a direct representation of how, maybe how we're feeling or how we're expressing ourselves, right? And I think it can, it can mean 1,000 words. And,
Exactly.
the way that it's fitting on your body, or just, the message that you want it to portray. And I think that your brand, Killen, is definitely has a very strong message, right? Not only is it in the fitness industry, but also tying aspects of your culture into it. And I think that's a really interesting fusion, because like fitness for me, fitness is very important to me, right? And that in itself is, I feel like, is a whole culture in itself, right? And then you're also adding and fusing ethnicity culture into it as well. So how do you kind of balance those two in your designs and storytelling? I feel like obviously fitness is probably something that is very important to you. But then your culture and your cultural heritage is also very important. So how would you say you kind of balance those two in storytelling and design?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because like especially since Asian designs are not yet as mainstream, right? It's really easy to tip over into that custom territory if we're not careful. That's why like most of the current attempts I see are in streetwear where loud designs are more accepted. Like a lot of them are just very bold pieces. And for activewear, it's there's also the aspect of having functional clothes, right? So it's a kind of a mix of Asian design elements with more modern fabrics, while also just kind of taking the appropriate Asian cultural influence. Like, for example, the polo shirt for tennis, right? Tennis and golf, it's supposed to be a bit more sophisticated sports. So it's like the polo shirt. People wear polo shirts because they want to look a little bit more elegant, right? So that's why I was taking design elements from the Mandarin shirt and Asian dresses. But for something like the hoodies, I was going more for a little bit more like a warrior look, because the fit is more oversized. You wear it off court and it feels a bit more like fitting. For example, the women's sweater, the inspiration was more like an Asian archer armor. So the sleeve has different color to kind of like portray an archer like shoulder pad. One of the designs for my next collection features like a shoulder that almost looks like a shoulder pad, but it's very subtle. Like the way I kind of balance it out is sometimes the design element is infused through like some custom stitching or like different colors. And it could be also additional fabric that adds a shape that resembles an Asian design.
Got it. Well, I'm very excited for the next collection and looking forward to when that will be launching. So we're at almost the end of the podcast now. Hi, and I have a few more questions for you. What can the audience look forward to with Kilon Athletics in the next year or so? Do you have any exciting news for us? You did mention a new collection, but let the audience know, what we can expect in the next year.
Currently, I'm working on finalizing the designs, and once it's finalized, we're gonna kick off mass production. Right now, the current timeline is inventory will arrive at the end of September, so that's when we're looking to do our hard launch. And if things look good, then hopefully we can also release the second collection, which I cannot reveal yet. The, but yeah, I've already started working on those designs because the whole process of designing to manufacturing can take up to 9 to 10 months. So I have to be prepared if things go well.
Yeah, exciting, very exciting. And we can't wait for all of that to happen. And I have one last question for you. Hi, and um, I would love to know, what type of legacy do you want Kilon to leave with, not just in fashion, but in culture and community?
I'm hoping the brand will be something that people happily embrace. And I'm hoping to explore multiple Asian cultures and help everyone embrace their own heritage. I also really enjoy just seeing other brands and other businesses, like other entrepreneurs around me. And I've been thinking about how I can collaborate with them because I feel like everyone is kind of rushing to carve out their own space in our culture. But I think as small businesses, I think it's better if we work together and help lift each other up, collaborate. I think there's space to work together between all of us. I've been talking to other activewear brands, and yeah, I think collaboration is the name of the game right now.
Yeah, amazing. Well, yeah, I think the idea of branching out into different cultures and ethnicities is something I'm definitely very excited about. So I can't wait to see the next stage of Killen and how you're going to be expanding and growing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. Hi. Where can our listeners find out more about Killen Athletics?
Thank you so much for having me. The listeners can find me on Instagram at keelan.athletics. I'm also on TikTok with the same handle. And then if you want to check out the online store, it's ky-lan.shop.
Perfect. We'll leave all of that in the show notes. Hi, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Maggie.